Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Radiantly Feminine podcast. My name is Mookie if you're new here, and on this podcast I created a safe space for us to talk about things that will help you glow up and operate in a more authentic way by simply embracing your feminine energy. Now, today's episode is about removing that good girl label. Now, this episode was really important for me to do because I am somebody who carried or wore the good girl label throughout her entire life, and it took me relearning and reparenting myself to figure out who I actually was, and it was not necessarily that good girl that I was trying so hard to be. Now, I will talk about why we tend to put on that good girl label and where it all comes from and how to remove it if you haven't done so already. Now, if you ever felt like you were being too nice or just overly kind and it was the complete opposite or just misaligned with who you actually are, then this episode is definitely for you. And I really do think that it's important to remove the good girl label because removing it means you get to reclaim your voice, your boundaries, and your authentic truth. Now, I do want to say that I am not an expert by any means, so anything that I'm sharing with you guys, it's from learned experiences, and these are things that I've picked up on. I have really good pattern recognition, so it's really easy for me to pick up on these things and just to get lessons from the things that I've learned. So this is information that I've gathered, and this is what I believe to be true. So if you feel like it doesn't resonate with you or you feel like it's not true, I'm not telling you that you have to believe what I believe. But if it resonates with you, that's good. If it doesn't, that's okay as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just get right into the episode. Now, what is the good girl label? The good girl label is trying to please other people in a nutshell. It is just trying to please other people. It's not necessarily people pleasing, but it can straddle the line of people pleasing. But this is pleasing people to the point where you are avoiding conflict, or you are not speaking up about mistreatment, or you're being agreeable at your own expense. And this can all lead to self-abandonment because, again, we are not operating as our authentic self. Now, the good girl label, I think it can stem from many different things, but the biggest one for me is childhood and childhood conditioning. I think that we have certain societal expectations and things that we are just simply trying to survive, especially as children, because if we're experiencing traumatic things and our analytical mind hasn't developed, it can be a lot harder to rationalize why we are experiencing trauma or why we are going through trauma. So a lot of these things can play a huge part in us putting that good girl label on. I want to talk about how childhood conditioning can lead us to put that good girl label on, because childhood conditioning is probably the biggest one or the biggest factor for us to put that good girl label on. I want you to think about how people will refer to their kids as good or bad. Now, when a child is labeled as good, specifically a girl, and she is labeled as good, a lot of the time she's receiving praise for being easy, for being manageable, for being quiet, and for being agreeable. Now, when you look at these things, it's all about a child just being able to be easy to manage, basically, or easy to control, and you really don't have to do a lot to take care of them because they're taking care of their own needs or suppressing their own needs to be easier for you to manage. And when we think about somebody referring to their child as bad, it's literally the opposite of what I've said. They're not being quiet, they're not being agreeable, they're not being easy, they're not being easy to manage, they're not being easy to control. That's what we label as bad. So we put this good girl label on to avoid being looked at a certain way and being perceived a certain way. So when we put that good girl label on, it's basically like a shield. We're trying to protect ourselves. So we want to keep being seen as good, especially if we receive praise early on from an early age. We receive praise for being easy, for being good, for being quiet, for being agreeable. We're like, oh, okay, this is going to make my shield stronger, so let me keep doing these things so I can keep holding my shield up to protect myself. And I do think that societal expectations play a huge part in putting this good girl label on as well, specifically gender roles, because women are seen as nurturing and caring, and from an early age, if we take on those responsibilities of being nurturing and caring, or we just show that we are capable of being nurturing and caring early on, we are, again, going to receive praise for that. And when we receive that praise, that's when we're like, okay, this is good, and so I'm going to keep doing it. And if you think about it, a lot of the times, boys are not praised for these things that girls are praised for. Now, it is nice when children just behave. I get it, I'm a mom. But I don't necessarily see boys being praised for the same things, especially because other boys don't behave this way. So if a boy's not rough, or he's too gentle, and he is more nurturing and avoids certain things that are seen as masculine, then we're more prone to side-eye him, because I do think that in our society, masculinity is often portrayed as being the opposite of women. So I think that men are taught to dislike or go against the grain when it comes to femininity, because a lot of the time, masculinity, what I'm trying to say is a lot of the time masculinity is based on not being a woman in our society. That's not the true definition of masculinity. But for a lot of men in our society, they are taught that not being a woman means you're a man. So when we have childhood conditioning and social expectations, this can lead us to, or teach us to be self-sacrificing from a very early age. And I can say that this is true for me. Now, the last one I want to talk about where the good girl label can stem from is emotional survival. When you grow up in a chaotic home, or grow up and experience a lot of trauma at an early age, and then some children will learn to be quiet, be easy, suppress your emotions to keep the peace and to avoid rejection. So this is what I mean when we can start self-sacrificing, and I have experienced this on my end as well. I grew up in a very chaotic household, so I felt like I had to suppress my emotions, and I had to be quiet, and I couldn't speak up about mistreatment because I had to keep the peace. I had to make it easier because I saw that my mom was constantly stressed, and she was going through a lot of stresses in her life, and so I didn't want to be an addition to stress for her. So I had to suppress a lot of myself, a lot of my emotions, a lot of the things that I wanted to say. I had to learn how to suppress that from a very early age because I thought that it was difficult. And maybe I was taught that I was being difficult if I spoke up or showed emotion or cried or whatever the case may be. So from an early age, when a child learns that they need to keep quiet and suppress their emotions, then they are just trying to emotionally survive. But this can lead them to start self-sacrificing and put on that good girl label. Now, what is the hidden cost of wearing the good girl label? I want to talk about this part because this is important to know if you are going to remove the good girl label, or maybe you're fine with being the good girl. Who knows? If you don't want to remove the good girl label, you need to know that there are hidden costs to keeping that good girl label on you. Now, I'm not saying being kind and being nice is bad, but if you were doing it to the point where you were abandoning yourself or self-sacrificing or sacrificing yourself, and then you most likely do need to remove the good girl label, especially if you are not being authentic to you. The hidden cost, one of the hidden costs for wearing the good girl label is resentment. You will have a lot of hidden, a lot of unspoken resentment, and this is because the good girl label will have you feeling like you will be rewarded for being good. And I hear a lot of people say this, not just women. I will hear a lot of people say this, and it's not just women. I will hear, I'm so good and I still struggle. I'm so good and I'm doing everything right. Why am I not being rewarded? They're a bad person. They do this and that. Why are they getting what they want? And this will have us holding on to resentment because we are left feeling like we are owed something. And I think that, again, comes from that childhood conditioning when we are receiving praise for being good. And it can also be from religious conditioning as well. We are taught that we have to be good to receive things, or receive the things that we want in life, or just receive certain rewards. So when we go through life with this good girl label, we're saying, oh, I'm good, and I received a reward, which was praise back in the day. So if I keep being good, life will keep rewarding me. And I'm not saying that's not true, but that's not the only way you receive the things that you want in life. So if you find yourself being good and wearing that good girl label and doing everything right according to the good girl rules, and you don't get what you want, especially in that moment, that can cause you to hold on or build up resentment. And I kind of touched on this a few minutes ago, but you will be more likely to suppress your emotions because you are trying to be agreeable. You are putting other people's emotions above your own. You are basically telling yourself that your emotions, your feelings don't matter when they are compared to other people's. So again, this will leave you feeling like you have to suppress your emotions because you want to be seen as good. You want to be liked. And this can also look like having weak or unclear boundaries. So when I was removing the good girl label for myself, I didn't just do it in one swipe. Like, I had to unlearn a lot of things. So for me, I realized that I was not only suppressing my emotions, but I had no boundaries. I literally didn't even know how to set boundaries until I reached adulthood. It's kind of embarrassing, but not really, because I don't care. I'm glad I am able to set boundaries now. But what I'm trying to say is that when you are a good girl and you learn to suppress your emotions, especially early on, and you learn to self-sacrifice and yada yada, you do not have boundaries. Your boundaries may not be clear and they may be very, very weak, or you just have boundaries and you do not hold any consequences behind those boundaries if those boundaries are crossed. And another hidden cost for wearing the good girl label is that you are going to attract toxic people, because toxic people look for people that are quiet, that have weak boundaries, that are manageable, that are easy to control and easy to manipulate, aka the good girl. So if you are going to go through life continuing to wear this good girl label, which means not operating authentically, sacrificing yourself, and abandoning yourself, then you will continue attracting toxic people. You will continue to carry resentment with you when you're not receiving your reward, and you will continue to suppress your emotions and have weak boundaries. And I just want you to know that if you are somebody who thinks that wearing the good girl label is not that bad, I mean, if you're listening to this episode, then you probably don't think that, but I do want you to know, or even if you know somebody that is wearing the good girl label first and then this episode, so that they can hear the hard truth about wearing the good girl label. But if you know somebody, or you are somebody that wears the good girl label, just know being liked is not the same as being respected. And I want to say that the breaking point for me was realizing I was a people pleaser. I realized that I've been showing up for everyone else the way I wanted somebody to show up for me. So what I had to do was stop showing up for people the way I wanted somebody to show up for me and show up for myself that way. And that was the start of me removing my good girl label, because I didn't like the way it felt being the only one that showed up in friendships and relationships and just carrying the emotional weight. And if you are somebody who is like me, you know that it's not good for you, but you're having a hard time just breaking out of that mold or removing the good girl label, then I do want to talk about some signs that you are outgrowing that good girl label. And you don't have to beat yourself up for being a certain way, because you are taking steps in the right direction if you are listening to this episode right now. So I don't want you to be hard on yourself. Your time will come when you stop doing certain things or breaking certain habits. So sign number one that you might be outgrowing the label is you start to notice that you are feeling drained after certain interactions. And this can simply be because you are overgiving or you are overextending yourself to certain people. So that will leave you feeling drained and like you have low energy, especially if it's more than once with the same person. Another sign that you are outgrowing the label is that you're questioning your silence. And what I mean by that is when we avoid conflict, a lot of the times we are being quiet. We are not saying anything. So you are questioning why you didn't say anything. And that's what I mean by that, is you're just questioning it. You're questioning what could you have done in that moment, or just reflecting or saying, hey, I'm going to do this next time. That's a sign that you were outgrowing the label. Another sign that you are outgrowing the label is that you just feel yourself wanting to speak up, but you feel like it's guilty or wrong. Trust me, you are headed in the right direction, because it wouldn't even be a thought in your mind if you weren't heading in the right direction. This is coming up, and I know guilt and feeling like something's wrong is not a comfortable feeling to sit with, but this is coming up because you are trying to switch. You are basically in between the you that doesn't have the label and the you that does have the label. So when you are wanting to speak up, you're moving towards the part of you that doesn't have the label. but you feel guilty and wrong, you're still attached to that old self that's still wearing the label. But trust me, you are headed in the right direction for even wanting to speak up in the first place. So all of these signs that you are outgrowing the label are simply just you starting to reflect on your behaviors, why you did this, or why you're feeling this way. So if you notice yourself reflecting on certain things, that is a telltale sign that you are outgrowing the good girl label. Okay, so now we need to talk about releasing this good girl label. When you remove the good girl label, you are basically saying, I'm not this person anymore, I'm not going to operate this way anymore, but who am I? So when you remove the good girl label, you are going to have to redefine yourself, or else that label is just going to stick back to you. So when you are doing the work and reflecting and trying to remove this good girl label, you need to redefine yourself. And it's not like you're becoming a whole new person. You're just saying, I'm not a good girl, or what society deems to be a good girl, and I'm just me now. That's it. You're not a whole different person. You're not a whole new person. You're not somebody else. You're not the person on your Pinterest board or the person that you have in your head. You are simply operating as your authentic self now, because you don't have to be agreeable. You don't have to be easy. You don't have to be quiet for the sake of avoiding conflict. You are just you. And that's okay, because we are living in a world where everybody gets to be somebody. And you were brought into this world to be you. And I think that is just such a beautiful thing. So for those of you who are having trouble releasing the good girl label, which is probably another reason why you clicked on this episode, but in order for you to remove this good girl label, I'm going to give you a few things that you can start doing to go ahead and just get the gears turning for them. So you can go ahead and just get started with removing this label off of yourself. So the first thing you want to do is just say no. Start saying no. You don't have to have any explanation. Just say no like you mean it. Don't sit here and hesitate. Practice saying no, especially when you are feeling the need to say yes. For me, I was somebody who just said yes automatically. Didn't even think about it. Wasn't even a second thought. I just said yes. Somebody's asking me, somebody's taking their time out of their day to ask me to go out with them, to hang out with them, do this and that with them, like asking me to do them a favor. I just immediately would jump and say yes. Not even thinking about it, not even thinking, does Mookie actually want to do this? Does Mookie have time for this? Does Mookie have to move things around in order for her to do this? I would simply just sit there and say yes. Not even thinking about it. So I want you to practice saying no, because that, my dear, if you keep saying yes, especially if you were like me, if you kept saying yes and not thinking about it, then that just means you're operating from a people-pleasing place. And then I also want you to normalize disappointing people. And I want you to know that it's okay to disappoint other people, because you are not living your life for anybody but you. So if you are saying yes or putting other people's needs above your own just to avoid disappointing somebody, then you are not operating as your authentic self. So I want you to stop that, and I want you to normalize disappointing people and acknowledging that it's okay to disappoint somebody, because everybody experiences disappointment in their life. And true people that are also operating in their authentic self and are emotionally mature will understand if you can't make it, and if you can't show up for them right now. They will truly understand. And if the people that don't, or take that disappointment out on you, then those aren't your people speaking. So acknowledge that disappointing people is okay, especially if they are needing you to put them above yourself. The next thing I need you to normalize in order to remove the good girl label is taking up space. And I'm saying this because a huge part of being a good girl or wearing the good girl label is caring about being liked. And you need to stop worrying about being liked. You need to stop caring about being liked, because like it or not, even if you're the good girl, there are people out here that are simply not going to like you. And guess what? That's okay. It doesn't stop you from being you. It doesn't stop you from being yourself. It doesn't stop you. It doesn't stop anything. It literally does not stop anything. So I need you to understand that there are going to be people that like you. There are going to be people that don't like you. But if you are operating as somebody who is not authentic, if you are not operating as your authentic self, then you are basically manipulating people to like you. So operate as your authentic self and normalize not caring about people liking you. And then the last thing I want you to normalize when you are trying to remove this good girl label is understand that the right people will not subject you to mistreatment or disrespect. And this one is huge, because When you are someone who, because if you are wearing the good girl label as self-protection, you have to understand that even when you are wearing the good girl label, people are still going to judge you, people are still going to mistreat you, people are going to disrespect you, and it's going to be that much easier if you're wearing the shield or wearing this good girl label. But if you remove that label and you say, hey, this is me, this is who I am, I know what I'm worth, I know what I deserve, you're going to understand that mistreatment and disrespect are not okay, and you're going to have to remove those people, and they're going to be upset about it, they're going to be disappointed. And guess what? You're doing what's best for you, you're protecting yourself without that good girl label. And it's really common for us women to question ourselves. So when you are trying to remove this good girl label, I want you to journal your situations, especially if they were tough situations that evoked a lot of emotions or big emotions for you. I want you to write down these situations so you can minimize the gaslighting. Because you know what happened. And sometimes we do question ourselves, sometimes we gaslight our own selves. So I want you to start journaling down certain situations that evoke big emotions for you. And then I want you to feel your feelings without judgment. Don't sit here and say, I don't care, because acting like you don't care doesn't make you a stronger or tougher person. It just makes you more emotionally unintelligent. So feel your feelings and feel them without judgment. And then, like I was saying earlier, I was somebody who would say yes. So I want you to start saying no, and say no like you actually mean it. I want you to pause if you are having a hard time making that shift from saying yes to no. Then just pause before you actually agree, because that was something I had to do because I wouldn't even think about it. So when somebody asked me to do something, I would always make sure that I paused before answering them, because I had to check in with myself. And that was my problem. I wasn't checking in with myself. I was just automatically assuming that I would be able to do the favor or, just be available for them. I would just automatically assume. So I want you to just start pausing before you agree to anything. When you pause, I really just want you to think about your decision, and absolutely do not worry about pressure. Do not worry about them being upset if you say no. Just really think about your answer and make sure it's authentic to you, and that way it pulls you out of that agreeable mindset. And another shift that you can make is just practice honest expression in small ways. Because your emotions are yours, and I want you to start embracing them. We tend to, avoid our emotions or suppress our emotions when we are wearing this good girl label. So I want you to just practice expressing your emotions and just sitting with your honest emotions. And what I mean by this is not suppressing anything. If you feel unhappy or you feel disgusted, own it. It's your emotion. Don't sit here and act like you didn't feel that way or anything like that. Just own your emotions. But as long as you're not being disrespectful to other people. Now, I do want to, before we wrap this episode up, when you are operating as the good girl, I want you to know that you're basically just performing. Again, you are manipulating people into liking you. I think it's another form, or it's straddling the line of people pleasing, because you are trying to operate as somebody who is likable, as somebody who is agreeable, and you are basically just putting on a performance of yourself rather than just being your authentic self. A lot of the times this will show up as you doing and saying what sounds right instead of what feels true to you. And oftentimes when we are in the mindset of just being agreeable, we are avoiding the truth. We are not being honest with other people and ourselves. So essentially, if you want to have that hard or tough love, you are being a liar when you are putting the good girl label on yourself and going through life as the good girl, if it's not authentic to you. Now, I do want to say that pretty women need to be extra careful with wearing this good girl label. And I say this because we naturally trigger insecurities just by being pretty. And this is because when you're pretty, it signals high value. But women that wear the good girl label, who are overly nice and overly giving, it signals insecurities or low self-esteem. So when someone sees a good girl and they're being overly nice and overly kind and overly giving and overexerting themselves, that signals, hey, this person has low self-esteem. They need to go the extra mile because they don't feel secure within themselves. And I'm not saying that's how all insecure or low self-esteem people act, but when you do act that way, that's what it signals for other people. And when you are pretty, it signals this woman knows she's pretty. We have mirrors, we have cameras, We have pictures. This woman has seen herself and she knows she's pretty. So when you put the pretty girl and the good girl label together, this combo is a fast track to disrespect. And I am somebody who did not see her worth, did not see her value, did not know how pretty she was, and wore the good girl label for majority of my life. I found myself being disrespected in more ways than one with so many people. I'm telling you, if you are pretty and you do not know this and you are wearing the good girl label, you are putting yourself on a fast track to disrespect each and every time, no matter who the person is. Because being pretty signals high value, wearing the good girl label signals low self-esteem. So I want you to ask yourself, you can even journal about this. I want you to ask yourself, am I actually expressing myself or am I managing how I'm being perceived? I journaled about this because I needed to really get in touch with myself and really have an honest conversation with myself, because when I journal about these things, or even when I just think about these reflective questions, it provides me with an opportunity to have an honest conversation with myself and really get to the knit and grit of why I'm doing this, but also understand myself better. And I do want to briefly touch on how this will show up in dating for you. So if you are somebody that wears the good girl label, you are going to have a hard time in dating, because again, you are going to be overextending yourself. You are going to be overgiving just to be chosen. So this can show up as that pick-me behavior that we see a lot of people talking about now. But, well, let me rephrase that. This will show up in dating and friendships. And just all of your other relationships. You will find yourself overgiving just to be chosen. You will avoid hard conversations. You will avoid accountability because you have this perception about yourself, and anything that goes against it basically tears down that perception that you have, or tears away at that good girl label. And if you're not willing to part ways with that label, that can feel very hard and very tough for you. And it will make taking accountability that much harder. This will also have you accepting less than you deserve, because you're just trying to remain peaceful. You're trying to remain agreeable. And this will also show up as tolerating a lot more than you should. This will be cheating, lies, etc. You will just find yourself tolerating a lot because, again, you just want to keep the peace. And this will also enable you to stay in connections way longer than you should. And especially if these connections no longer serve you, or in these connections you are finding yourself being mistreated and disrespected. You know it's wrong to be treated this way, but you find yourself staying a lot longer than necessary. Now, I want to be 100% real with you guys. The good girl label is not a good thing, and I think I've stressed that throughout this episode, but the good girl label, when you wear the good girl label, you go through life wearing the good girl label, you are going to be chosen for your convenience and not your actual depth. So I want you to think about that, reflect on that if you need to, and then choose yourself. I want you to choose your standards. And I want you to choose what makes you feel happy and not the other way around. So we are actually nearing this episode. I don't know how long it is yet. So I really want you to know that the only real way you can completely remove this good girl label is by trusting yourself. And when you start trusting yourself and you're able to look back and look at all of the things that you accepted and all of the things that you've done while wearing this good girl label, you will also realize that self-trust was the biggest loss that you had when you were wearing this label. And you will also realize that you were overriding your own instincts and your own intuition just for approval. Now, when you are rebuilding your self-trust, this is going to show up as you listening to your first reaction or your first instinct or your first thought. This is you honoring your small no's, like I talked about a few minutes ago. Just being able to say no and meaning it. And also thinking about your decision before you give somebody an answer. So a closing question that I have for you guys is, who am I when I'm not trying to be good? This can be a reflective question. This can be another journal prompt for you guys. This is more of an episode about reflection, because this is an internal shift that you have to make. I mean, pretty much everything I talk about is an internal shift. And then after you reflect or do your journal prompt, I want to invite you all to just choose one thing or one moment to honor yourself, your authentic self, without defaulting to people pleasing. Okay, so that is pretty much it for this episode. I want to thank you guys so much for being here. And like I stated earlier in the episode, if you found meaning in this, or if you know somebody that is wearing the good girl label, or you yourself, you're still wearing the good girl label, or you were previously wearing the good girl label, share this with somebody that actually needs to hear it as well. Because I think as women, we need to uplift one another and just be by each other's side and help one another, especially if we see something that isn't necessarily helping another woman get through life. So let's one by one help each other remove this good girl label, so that way we can operate as our authentic self. And again, I love you guys so much for being here, and I lost my momentum for a little bit, not gonna lie, but I am back. I got my episode outlines ready. I am ready to record and be posting weekly episodes. So I will talk to you guys next week, but before we close out this episode, I just want to leave you guys with a quote. And this quote is something that I found on Pinterest. It is, "You were never meant to be easy to manage. You were meant to be real." And I think that just tied the episode together completely and perfectly. So again, thanks so much for being here, you guys, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.